People of the galaxy, Velkor's voice boomed through the bay. The Velrothi Empire brings you a demonstration of true power. Watch and understand what it means to stand against us. The Velrothi soldiers led the three Night Fangs to the center of the bay, where a large arena had been set up. Combat drones activated, their weapons charging. Barriers of energy formed a cage around the space. Then on Velkor's command, one of the Night Fangs was released. What happened next was brutal and quick. The Night Fang moved like liquid shadow, tearing through the combat drones as if they were made of paper. Its claws ripped through metal. Its teeth crushed circuits and wires. The drones tried to fight back, shooting plasma bolts and energy beams, but the creature was too fast. In less than 2 minutes, every drone was destroyed. The crowd was silent. Some aliens looked terrified. Others looked impressed. The Night Fang stood in the center of the destruction, its glowing patterns pulsing bright red, its mouth open in what looked like a snarl. But Taeyang saw something different. While everyone else was watching the violence, he was watching the creature itself. The way its ears were pressed flat against its head, the way its tail was low, almost tucked, the irregular pulse of its patterns. These weren't the signs of an aggressive predator enjoying a hunt. These were signs of stress and fear. The Night Fang wasn't attacking because it wanted to. It was attacking because it was terrified and had no other choice. After the demonstration, Velkor approached the human delegation directly. He towered over them, looking down with barely hidden disdain. "Humans," he said, making their name sound like an insult. "Your species is new to the galaxy. You come from a soft world where the most dangerous thing is your own kind. You have no experience with true predators, no understanding of real strength." Doyen met his gaze calmly. "We understand enough. Do you?" Velkor gestured toward the Night Fangs, now being led back to their cages. "These creatures come from a death world. They are born killers, shaped by evolution to hunt and destroy. The Velrothi have learned to control them, to direct their fury. But you humans, with your weak bodies and gentle planet, you could never survive against such beasts. You need protection. The Velrothi Empire offers this protection for a price." "What price?" Hana asked, her voice hard. Velkor smiled, showing too many teeth. "Cooperation, resources, loyalty. The usual terms for those who wish to survive in this harsh galaxy." "We'll consider your offer," Doyen said carefully. "Consider quickly," Velkor replied. "The galaxy is not kind to the weak." After the Velrothi left, the human delegation gathered in their quarters. Hana was angry, pacing back and forth. "It's a threat," she said. "He's basically saying submit or we'll come after you with those creatures." "Obviously," Doyen agreed. "But we can't fight them, not yet. We don't have the ships or weapons." "There might be another way," Taeyang said quietly. Both of them turned to look at him. "The Night Fangs," Taeyang continued. "Everyone is afraid of them because they're violent and deadly. But I don't think they're naturally aggressive. During the demonstration, that creature was scared. Its body language showed fear, not confidence." "So what?" Hana said. "It still destroyed those drones in seconds, because it was trained to. Conditioned to. But underneath that conditioning, it's still a living being." Taeyang looked at Doyun. "On Earth, we have a long history with predators. Wolves, big cats, bears. Our ancestors learned to understand them, sometimes even to cooperate with them. What if the Night Fangs aren't the mindless killers the Velrothi claim? What if they're just frightened and abused?" Doyen was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "If you're right and we could prove it, it would change everything. The Velrothi's main advantage is fear. If we show that their weapons aren't as dangerous as they claim or that humans aren't as weak as they think, it might give us leverage." "It's dangerous," Hana warned. "If you're wrong about the Night Fangs, you could be killed." "But if I'm right," Taeyang said, "we might find allies where everyone else sees only monsters." Doyun made his decision. "We'll request a meeting with the Velrothi. Tell them we want to study the Night Fangs for scientific purposes. They'll probably allow it, thinking it will scare us even more." That night, Taeyang couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the Night Fang he'd seen in the arena, about the fear in its eyes, visible for just a moment before it had attacked the drones, about how every other species in the galaxy looked at those creatures and saw only danger, while he saw something else entirely. He saw an animal that had been taken from its home, forced to fight, and turned into something it was never meant to be. And if there was one thing humans understood, it was that broken things could sometimes be healed, and frightened things could learn to trust again. The next morning, Ambassador Doyen sent a formal request to the Velrothi delegation. The Velrothi warship was nothing like the human vessels Taiyang had traveled on. Everything was made of dark metal and sharp angles. The corridors were cold, and the air smelled strange, like burnt ozone and something else he couldn't identify. As he walked through the ship, flanked by Velrothi guards, he could feel eyes watching him from every shadow. Hana walked beside him, her hand never far from her weapon. Behind them were 3 more human security officers, all armed with plasma rifles. They looked tense. Nobody wanted to be here, but Taiyang had insisted, and Ambassador Doyen had agreed. Velkor himself met them at the entrance to the containment facility. He looked amused, which made Taiyang uneasy. "The human scientist wants to study our weapons," Velkor said, his voice echoing in the metal hallway. "I admit I am curious to see this. Your people claim to value knowledge above all else. Let us see if your curiosity is stronger than your fear." "I'm not afraid," Taiyang said quietly. Velkor laughed. "You will be." The containment facility was huge, with 3 separate cells arranged in a triangle. Each cell was surrounded by walls of shimmering energy that crackled with power. Inside each cell, Taiyang could see a Nightfang. The creatures looked even larger up close than they had in the arena. The Velrothi handlers were rough-looking soldiers who carried shock weapons and wore heavy armor. One of them, a scarred veteran with missing scales on his arm, stepped forward. "This is Stryker," he said, pointing to the largest Nightfang. "He's killed 12 beings who got too close. Very aggressive, very dangerous." Stryker was magnificent and terrifying at the same time. His black fur seemed to absorb the light around him, and his eyes glowed with an eerie blue color. The patterns along his spine pulsed in shades of red and orange. When he saw the humans approaching, he immediately charged at the barrier, slamming his massive body against the energy field. The impact made everyone except Taiyang step back. The Nightfang snarled, showing teeth that were longer than Taiyang's fingers. Foam dripped from his mouth. His claws raked at the barrier, leaving trails of light where they touched the energy. "You see?" Velkor said. "Pure aggression. Pure violence. This is what we control." But Taiyang was watching carefully. Yes, Stryker was aggressive. Yes, he was dangerous. But there was something in his eyes and the way he moved. After that initial charge, when the Nightfang stepped back, his ears flattened. His tail dropped. And for just a moment, when the handlers weren't looking directly at him, his body language changed completely. The tension left his shoulders. His patterns shifted to a darker, calmer color. It was an act. Stryker was performing the aggression the Velrothi expected from him. "I'd like to spend some time observing him," Taiyang said. "Alone, if possible." The handlers laughed. Velkor raised a hand to silence them. "Alone? You wish to be alone with this creature?" "The barrier will remain up," Taiyang said. "I just want to observe without distractions. Animals behave differently when they're being watched by their handlers." Velkor considered this. "Very well. You have until the day cycle ends. If you wish to flee before then, simply call for the guards." He smiled. "Though I suspect you will flee much sooner than that." The Velrothi left, though Hana refused to go. She positioned herself near the door with her security team, far enough to give Taiyang space but close enough to help if something went wrong. Taiyang approached the barrier slowly. Stryker immediately charged again, slamming into the energy field with enough force to make the entire cell shake. The Nightfang roared, a sound that echoed through the facility and made Taiyang's bones vibrate. But he didn't move back. He didn't flinch. He simply stood there, watching. After the third charge, when Stryker realized the human wasn't running or showing fear, the Nightfang stopped. He stood in the center of his cell, breathing heavily, his eyes fixed on Taiyang, waiting. Taiyang sat down on the floor, cross-legged, in front of the barrier. He wasn't looking directly at Stryker. Instead, he looked slightly to the side, keeping the Nightfang in his peripheral vision. It was a technique he'd learned studying wolves on Earth. Direct eye contact could be seen as a challenge. Looking away completely showed weakness. But this angle, this casual awareness, communicated something different. It said, "I see you, but I'm not threatening you." Minutes passed. Then an hour. Stryker paced in his cell, occasionally growling, but he didn't charge again. Slowly, his pacing took him closer to where Taiyang sat. The patterns on his body began to shift, the aggressive red fading to orange, then to amber. Taiyang began to speak softly, Not in English, but in Korean. His voice was low and rhythmic, almost like he was singing. He talked about Earth, about the forest where wolves still ran free, about how his grandmother had once told him stories of the first humans who befriended wolves thousands of years ago, about how those ancient people had learned that the key to understanding predators wasn't domination or fear, but patience and respect. Stryker stopped pacing, his massive head tilted slightly to one side, listening. Animals might not understand words, but they understood tone. They understood intention. Another hour passed. Taeyang remained still, occasionally speaking, mostly just being present, not demanding anything, not expecting anything, just existing in the same space, calm and unthreatening. Then something remarkable happened. Stryker approached the barrier directly, not with aggression, but with curiosity. He lowered his huge head until it was level with Taeyang's, separated only by the crackling energy field. This close, Taeyang could see details he'd missed before. The Night Fang's eyes weren't just glowing blue, they had depth to them. Intelligence. Old scars marked his muzzle and shoulders, evidence of abuse or fights. And his patterns, now that he was calm, showed colors Taeyang had never seen in the demonstrations. Soft purples and deep blues. Slowly, very slowly, Taeyang extended his hand toward the barrier. He kept his palm open, fingers relaxed. It was an invitation, nothing more. Stryker stared at the hand. His nose moved closer to the barrier, close enough that Taeyang could feel the heat radiating from the creature's body. Then, in a moment that made Taeyang's heart race, the Night Fang closed his eyes. In wolf behavior, closing eyes in front of another being was a sign of trust. It meant, I don't see you as a threat. I am vulnerable to you and I accept that. Taeyang felt a wave of emotion so strong it almost made him cry. This creature, this supposedly mindless killer, was showing trust. After years of abuse and forced violence, some part of him still remembered what it meant to connect with another being. I'm sorry, Taeyang whispered in Korean. I'm sorry for what they did to you. The moment was broken by the sound of doors opening. Velcor strode in, his face twisted in anger and confusion. Behind him came several handlers and other Velrathi officials. What is this? Velcor demanded. What did you do to him? Stryker immediately changed. His patterns flashed red. His lips pulled back in a snarl. He became the aggressive weapon the Velrathi expected, but Taeyang had seen the truth. It was a mask, a survival strategy. Taeyang stood slowly. I didn't do anything.
I just gave him a choice.
For the first time, someone treated him like a living being instead of a weapon. Impossible, one of the handlers said. Night Fangs don't respond to kindness. They only understand force. Have you ever tried anything else? Taeyang asked. The silence that followed was telling. Velcor's eyes narrowed. You have proven nothing. The creature is still contained, still controlled. Your little display changes nothing. But word of what had happened spread quickly through the station. By the time Taeyang and Hana returned to their quarters, messages were flooding in from various species, all asking the same question. How did a human calm a Night Fang? That evening, Ambassador Doyen called a meeting. The Velrathi are angry, he said. Velcor is claiming you used some kind of forbidden technology or psychic manipulation. I didn't, Taeyang said. I just sat with him. I spoke gently. I showed him I wasn't a threat. I know, Doyen said, but now the Velrathi have to respond. They can't let this stand without losing face. Velcor has issued a formal challenge under galactic law. He wants a public demonstration. A demonstration of what? Hana asked. Of whether humans truly have the ability to connect with other species or whether what happened was luck. Doyen looked troubled. Taeyang, they want you to do it again, but this time in front of the entire Galactic Council. And this time there won't be a barrier between you and the Night Fang. The room went silent. If I refuse, Taeyang asked, then the Velrathi will claim we're frauds and liars. They'll push for sanctions against Earth. But if you accept and fail, you could be killed, and humanity will be seen as foolish and weak. Taeyang thought about Stryker, about that moment of trust, about how there were 2 more Night Fangs still trapped in cells, still being treated as weapons instead of beings. I'll do it, he said quietly. Taeyang, you can't, Hana protested. It's too dangerous. Stryker trusted me, Taeyang said. In that one moment he chose trust over fear. How can I do any less? Outside the window the stars shone cold and distant, and somewhere on the Velrathi warship, a Night Fang named Stryker lay in his cell, his patterns pulsing in colors of confusion and something that might have been hope. The Grand Council chamber was built to impress and intimidate. It rose from the center of Nexus Prime like a crystal mountain, with walls so clear they seemed to disappear. Inside, representatives from 40 different species sat in curved rows that spiraled upward toward a domed ceiling. Holographic screens floated in the air, showing the proceedings to millions of beings across the galaxy. Taeyang had never seen so many aliens in one place. There were beings made of light, beings that looked like walking crystals, beings that floated in tanks of liquid. And all of them were watching him. He sat in the human section with Ambassador Doyun, Hana, and a new member of their delegation, a woman named Mirai, who specialized in human history and culture. She had arrived on a fast ship from Earth 2 days ago, bringing with her records and data that Doyen thought might be useful. In the section across from them sat the Velrothi delegation. Velcor looked confident, almost smug. He had every reason to be. The challenge he'd issued was clever. If Taeyang succeeded, the Velrothi could claim the test was flawed. If Taeyang failed or refused, humanity would be shamed. At the center of the chamber, floating in a column of soft light, was Council Chair Therax. The being was ancient, its body a mass of flowing robes and mist that occasionally revealed glimpses of something that might have been a face. When it spoke, the voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We gather to address a challenge issued under the ancient laws," Therax said. "War Master Velcor of the Velrothi Empire has accused the human delegation of fraud and manipulation. He claims that the incident with the Nightfang known as Striker was achieved through forbidden means." Doyen stood. "The human delegation denies these accusations completely. Our representative, Taeyang, used no technology and no psychic abilities. He simply demonstrated understanding and patience." "Words are insufficient," Velcor said, rising to his full impressive height. "Let there be a trial. Let the human prove his claimed abilities before all of us in conditions that cannot be disputed." Therax's misty form shifted. "The trial of dominance is an ancient rite rarely invoked. If the human accepts, he will face a Nightfang without barriers or protections. Success will prove humanity's claim. Failure will result in death, and humanity must accept Velrothi terms for protection." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some species looked excited by the prospect of drama. Others looked concerned. The trial of dominance was old galactic law, meant for settling disputes between warrior cultures. It hadn't been invoked in over a century. "There must be another way," Hana said quietly to Doyen. "This is barbaric." "It's legal," Doyen replied just as quietly. "And if we refuse, we look weak and guilty." Taeyang stood before anyone could stop him. "I accept the trial." Hana grabbed his arm. "Taeyang, no." He looked at her with calm eyes. "I have to. Not just for Earth, but for them. The Nightfangs. Everyone sees them as weapons, but they're not. They're intelligent beings who have been enslaved and abused. If I can prove that, if I can show the galaxy who they really are, maybe we can set them free." "And if you die proving it?" Hana demanded. "Then at least I tried." He turned to face the council. "I accept, but I have a request. I want to know more about the Nightfangs. Their homeworld, their nature, anything the Velrothi can provide." Velcor laughed. "Denied. You will face the trial as we did, with no preparation and no special knowledge. That is the law." Therax's voice filled the chamber again. "The trial is set for 3 days hence. The human Taeyang will face a Nightfang chosen by War Master Velcor in the trial arena under full council observation. All present will witness. The galaxy will judge." The session ended and chaos erupted. Representatives from dozens of species tried to approach the humans, some to offer support, others to question them, still others to place bets on the outcome. Hana and her security team had to push through the crowds to get Taeyang out safely. Back in their quarters, Mirai immediately began pulling up information on her portable screen. "I've been researching Nightfangs," she said. "The Velrothi control all the official data, but I found some older records from before they conquered the species." "What did you find?" Taeyang asked. "The Nightfangs come from a planet called Nyx Prime. It's a death world, yes, but not because of the Nightfangs themselves. The whole ecosystem is extreme. The Nightfangs were the apex predators, but they weren't mindless killers. They had complex social structures, possibly even primitive tool use. One exploration report from 200 years ago suggested they might be pre-sapient." "Pre-sapient?" Doyen looked interested. You mean they might be on the verge of developing civilization? It's possible, Mirai said. But the Velrothi classified all the data and forbid further study. They took specimens for their military program and left the planet under blockade. Nobody has been allowed to visit in decades. Taeyang felt sick. If they're intelligent, then what the Velrothi have done is slavery. That's against galactic law. Technically, they're classified as non-sapient animals, Doyen said. The law only protects species that are proven to be intelligent. Then we need to prove it, Taeyang said firmly. Over the next 2 days, Mirai worked frantically to gather evidence. She dug through old archives, finding scattered reports from explorers and scientists who had visited Nix Prime before it was locked down. She found descriptions of Nightfangs working together in coordinated hunts, using simple tactics and even primitive signals. She found notes about their emotional complexity and social bonds. Meanwhile, Taeyang prepared himself mentally. He spent hours meditating, clearing his mind. Hana insisted he train physically too, learning at least basic defense moves, but Taeyang refused. If I go in there preparing to fight, the Night Fang will sense it, he said. I need to go in with nothing but openness and calm. That's insane, Hana said. Maybe, but it's the only way this works. On the morning of the 3rd day, Mirai requested time before the council. Doyen supported the request and Therax allowed it. Mirai stood before the gathered representatives, her hands shaking slightly but her voice strong. I want to present evidence about the Night Fangs, she began. She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. Images appeared, ancient recordings from Nix Prime. Night Fangs moving in organized packs, their patterns flashing in complex sequences that looked like communication. Young Night Fangs playing in ways that suggested not just instinct but imagination. Night Fangs carefully burying their dead, standing vigil over the graves. This behavior suggests intelligence, Mirai said. Not animal cunning, but true sapience. The Night Fangs may be a developing species, one that was enslaved before they could reach their full potential. Then she showed something else. Records from Earth. Holographic videos of humans with wolves, with horses, with elephants, even with great cats. She showed indigenous peoples living alongside predators, not as masters or slaves, but as neighbors who understood and respected each other. She showed modern humans training with animals, forming bonds based on trust and mutual benefit. Humanity has lived alongside apex predators for our entire history, she said. We learned early that domination creates enemies, but understanding creates allies. We don't see animals as tools or weapons. We see them as individuals, each with their own personality and needs. The chamber was silent as the images played. Some of the older species looked thoughtful, remembering perhaps their own histories before they reached the stars. The younger species, those who had only known technology and conquest, looked confused or skeptical. Belcor stood abruptly. This proves nothing. Humans tamed weak animals on their soft world. The Night Fangs are nothing like your domesticated pets. They are weapons, pure and simple. This trial will prove it. The trial will prove only what we already know, Doyen said calmly. That understanding is stronger than force, Therax spoke. The evidence is noted. However, the trial will proceed as planned. Let actions speak where words and images cannot. That afternoon, Taeyang stood in a preparation room near the trial arena. He could hear the crowds gathering above, thousands of beings coming to watch. His heart was beating fast, but his hands were steady. Hana came in, fully armed and armored. I'll be watching from the closest position allowed, she said. If anything goes wrong, I'm coming in, rules or no rules. Nothing will go wrong, Taeyang said with more confidence than he felt. Which Night Fang did Velcor choose? Hana asked. A Velrothi handler entered to answer. The female, Shadow, War Master Velcor chose carefully. She is small but vicious. She has injured 15 handlers. She trusts nothing and no one. After the handler left, Hana looked at Taeyang with worry. A traumatized animal is more dangerous than an aggressive one. I know, Taeyang said quietly. But that also means she needs help more than the others. If I can reach her, it will mean more than reaching Stryker would have. Above them, the announcement echoed through the station. The trial was about to begin. Taeyang closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He thought about his grandmother's stories, about the first humans who sat beside wolves' dens offering food instead of threats, about how trust was always a choice and how sometimes the bravest thing you could do was be vulnerable. The door opened. It was time. The arena was massive. much larger than Taeyang had expected. The floor was smooth metal that reflected the lights from above. The walls were transparent, allowing millions of beings on the station and across the galaxy to watch. High above, the council sat in their chamber, silent observers of what was about to happen. Taeyang stood at the center of the arena, feeling very small and very alone. He wore simple clothes, no armor, no weapons. Around him, the crowd pressed against the transparent walls, their faces showing excitement, fear, curiosity. He could see Hana in the front, her hand on her weapon, her jaw clenched tight. Beside her stood Doyen and Mirai, both looking tense. On the opposite side of the arena, Velkor stood with his Velrothi warriors. He looked triumphant already, as if the trial was already won. Behind them, Taeyang could see a large holding cell. Inside, something moved in the shadows. Therax's voice filled the arena. Let it be known that this trial is conducted under ancient law. The human has chosen to face this challenge without weapons or protection. Whatever happens here is witnessed by the galaxy and accepted by all parties. Bring out the Night Fang, Velkor commanded. The holding cell opened, and Shadow emerged. The crowd gasped. Even though they had seen Night Fangs before, seeing one without barriers was different. Shadow was smaller than Striker, but somehow she looked more dangerous. Her black fur seemed to drink in the light around her. Her patterns flashed in chaotic bursts of red and orange, colors that spoke of rage and pain. Her eyes glowed with an intensity that was almost manic. But what struck Taeyang most was her movement. She didn't walk, she slunk, her body low to the ground, her muscles coiled tight. Every few steps she would flinch or whip her head around as if expecting an attack from nowhere. This wasn't an aggressive predator. This was a deeply traumatized being. Shadow spotted Taeyang and froze. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the arena. Taeyang could feel his heart pounding, but he kept his breathing slow and steady. He couldn't show fear. Fear would trigger her hunting instinct. Then Shadow charged. She moved incredibly fast, covering the distance in seconds. The crowd screamed. Hana started forward, only to be held back by the arena barriers. Shadow's claws scraped against the metal floor and her jaws opened wide, showing teeth that could easily tear through flesh and bone. Taeyang dropped to one knee and lowered his head. Shadow skidded to a stop less than 3 meters away, confused. Prey wasn't supposed to do this. Prey was supposed to run, and running triggered the chase, and the chase ended in blood. But this creature wasn't running. Shadow circled him slowly, her patterns flickering rapidly through different colors. She was trying to understand. Several times she lunged forward, snapping her jaws centimeters from Taeyang's body. But each time she pulled back at the last second. She was testing him, trying to provoke a reaction. Taeyang remained still. He kept his head down, his posture non-threatening. He focused on his breathing, keeping it calm and regular. In through the nose, out through the mouth, slow and steady. Minutes passed. They felt like hours. Shadow continued circling, her movements gradually slowing. Her patterns began to shift from red to orange, then to amber. The frantic energy was fading, replaced by something else. Confusion. Curiosity. Taeyang began to speak softly in Korean. His voice was low and gentle, almost a whisper, but in the silent arena everyone could hear him through the audio systems. I know you're scared, he said. I know they hurt you. I know you've learned that everything is a threat, that showing weakness means more pain. But I'm not here to hurt you. I don't want anything from you except to understand. Shadow stopped circling. Her massive head tilted slightly, listening. On my world we had animals like you, Taeyang continued. Predators, hunters, we were afraid of them once. But then some of us learned to see past the teeth and claws. We learned that predators are just trying to survive, just like we are. And sometimes when we showed them we weren't a threat, they showed us trust in return. He paused, then continued. I knew a dog once. Someone had hurt her badly when she was young. She was afraid of everything and everyone. She would bite if you tried to touch her. Everyone said she was vicious, that she couldn't be saved. But I sat with her. Every day I just sat nearby, not asking for anything, just being there. And slowly, over many months, she learned that not all humans would hurt her. One day she came and sat beside me. It was her choice. And that choice changed everything. Shadow had moved closer now, her head level with Taeyang's. Her patterns had shifted to amber and were starting to show hints of other colors, purples and blues that seemed to pulse with her breathing. I can't undo what they did to you, Taeyang said. I can't erase the pain or the fear. But I can show you that there's another way. that not everyone will hurt you, that you have a choice. He slowly reached into his pocket. The movement made Shadow tense, her patterns flashing red again. But Taeyang moved very slowly, very deliberately. He pulled out a small piece of dried meat. It was from Earth, something he'd kept for this moment. He held it in his open palm, arm extended but not reaching toward her. An offering. A gift freely given, with no expectations. Shadow stared at the meat. Her nose twitched, catching the scent. Food had always been complicated for her. The Velrathi had used it as a tool, giving it as a reward for violence, withholding it as punishment. Food meant manipulation and control. But this human wasn't demanding anything. He wasn't commanding her to perform. He was just offering, patiently waiting for her decision. Shadow's patterns went through a cascade of colors. Confusion, longing, fear, hope. She took a step forward, then stopped. Another step. Her head lowered cautiously toward his hand. The moment her tongue touched the meat, something in her broke. All the conditioning, all the abuse, all the fear. For just this moment, she was simply a being accepting kindness from another being. She took the meat gently, far more gently than anyone in the arena thought possible. She backed away a few steps and ate it, her eyes never leaving Taeyang's face. And then, in a moment that would be replayed across 1,000 worlds for generations to come, Shadow approached again. She lowered her massive head. Not in aggression. In submission. In trust, Taeyang reached out slowly and placed his hand on her forehead, just above her eyes. Her fur was softer than he expected, warm and alive. Shadow's patterns changed to a deep, peaceful blue, a color the Velrathi had claimed didn't exist in Nightfangs. A sound emerged from Shadow's throat. Not a growl or a snarl, but something different. A rumble, deep and rhythmic, something like a purr. She leaned into his touch, and her eyes, which had been wild and frantic, now looked calm. At peace. The arena erupted in noise. Some beings were cheering. Others were shouting in disbelief. The Velrathi section was in chaos, with Velkor shouting that it was a trick, a deception. But Therax's voice cut through the noise. Silence. The ancient being floated down from the council chamber, its misty form coalescing into something more solid. It approached the center of the arena, and as it did, Shadow looked up but didn't move away from Taeyang. She stayed close to him, protective now rather than threatening. The trial is concluded, Therax announced. The human has demonstrated what the Velrathi could not. Not dominance through force, but connection through understanding. The Nightfang's submission was not coerced. It was chosen freely. Velkor pushed forward to the barrier. This proves nothing. The creature is still dangerous. The human got lucky, did I? Taeyang asked quietly. He looked at Shadow, and she looked back at him. Or did I just treat her like a person instead of a weapon? He turned to face the council. Shadow isn't an animal. None of the Nightfangs are. They're intelligent. They understand. They feel. What the Velrathi have done to them isn't training or domestication. It's slavery. The word echoed through the arena like a thunderclap. Slavery. The worst crime under galactic law. Velkor's face twisted with rage. You have no proof of that. Don't I? Mirai's voice came over the audio system. She stood in the human section, holding up her datapad. I have evidence. Old reports, observations from before the Velrathi classified everything. The Nightfangs had social structures, tool use, primitive language. They were on the verge of developing civilization when the Velrathi invaded their world and enslaved them. She transmitted data to the council systems, and holographic displays lit up around the arena. Images of Nyx Prime, of Nightfangs living in complex family groups, of young ones being taught by elders, of behaviors that could only indicate intelligence and culture. The council members were silent, reviewing the data. Finally, Therax spoke. If this evidence is authentic, then the Velrathi Empire has committed a grave crime. A full investigation will be launched. Investigation? Doyen stepped forward. The evidence is clear. The Nightfangs are a sapient species. They deserve freedom and protection under galactic law. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species supported the humans' position. Others cautioned about jumping to conclusions. The Velrathi delegation was arguing loudly, trying to defend their actions. But in the center of the arena, none of that mattered. Taeyang sat on the floor and Shadow lay beside him, her head resting on his lap. Her patterns glowed softly in peaceful blues and purples, and for the first time in years, perhaps in her entire life, she felt safe. The days following the trial were chaotic. Nexus Prime had never seen so much activity. Representatives from dozens of species demanded emergency council sessions. Ships arrived carrying journalists, investigators, and activists. The Velrothi delegation tried to leave, but Therax ordered them to remain until the investigation was complete. Taeyang spent most of his time in a specially prepared facility with Shadow. The council had agreed that separating them might traumatize her further, and besides, the galaxy wanted to see more of their connection. Cameras recorded everything, broadcasting to billions of viewers across the stars. Shadow stayed close to Taeyang constantly. She followed him everywhere, her massive form surprisingly gentle in her movements. When he sat, she lay beside him. When he slept, she positioned herself between him and the door, protective. Her patterns remained in calm blues and purples, occasionally flickering to amber when strangers approached. On the third day after the trial, Taeyang requested to see the other two Nightfangs. The council approved and arrangements were made. Striker and Echo, the third Nightfang, were brought from the Velrothi ship to a secure area where Taeyang could interact with them. Hana insisted on being present with full security. "One Nightfang trusts you," she said. "That doesn't mean the others will." But when Striker saw Taeyang, something remarkable happened. The massive Nightfang's patterns immediately shifted from aggressive red to curious amber. He approached the barrier and did something he had never done before in captivity. He made a sound, a complex vocalization that wasn't quite a howl or a growl. It was almost like speech. Shadow responded immediately with her own vocalization, equally complex. The two Nightfangs were communicating. Mirai, who had been studying every recording of Nightfang sounds, gasped. "That's language," she said. "Not just animal calls. That's actual communication with grammar and syntax." Over the next few hours, with Shadow's help, Taeyang was able to gain Striker's trust as well. It happened faster than with Shadow, perhaps because Striker could see that Shadow trusted this human, and Nightfangs were social creatures who learned from their pack. Echo was more difficult. The third Nightfang was a male, smaller than Striker but larger than Shadow. His patterns were erratic, shifting rapidly between colors. He had been abused the worst of the three, and his trauma ran deep. It took 2 full days of patient interaction before Echo would even approach Taeyang, and another 3 before he allowed himself to be touched. But eventually, all 3 Nightfangs accepted Taeyang as part of their pack. They moved together in coordinated ways, communicating in their complex language, and with Mirai's help, Taeyang began to understand what they were saying. The breakthrough came when Shadow made a specific sound pattern while looking at a star chart. Mirai cross-referenced the pattern with astronomical data and found a match. A planet, coordinates, a location in space. "She's telling us where they're from," Mirai said, her voice shaking with excitement. "She's telling us how to find their homeworld." An emergency council session was called. Mirai presented her findings, showing how the Nightfang's vocalizations contained information, not just emotion. She played recordings of the 3 Nightfangs communicating, with computer analysis showing the complexity of their language. "This proves they're sapient," she concluded. "They have language. They have culture. They remember their home." The Velrothi didn't just capture animals. They enslaved a pre-spaceflight civilization. The evidence was overwhelming. Even species that had been skeptical now had to admit the truth. Therax made the formal declaration. "The beings known as Nightfangs are hereby recognized as a sapient species. Their enslavement by the Velrothi Empire is a crime against galactic law. Reparations and justice will be served." Velkor, who had been forced to attend the session, looked defeated. His empire's reputation was in ruins. Other species that the Velrothi had intimidated for years were now speaking up, demanding their own investigations. But the most important outcome was the decision to mount an expedition to Nyx Prime, the Nightfang homeworld. The council voted to send a mission to make first contact with the Nightfang civilization and offer them protection and membership in the galactic community. Humanity volunteered to lead the mission. Other species objected, saying humans were too new, too inexperienced. But Therax overruled them. "The humans have demonstrated an ability to connect with the Nightfangs that no other species has shown," the ancient being said. "They should lead first contact." Hana was given command of the expedition. Taeyang would serve as the primary contact specialist, and Shadow, Striker, and Echo would return home, finally free. The journey to Nix Prime took 2 weeks through hyperspace. The expedition fleet consisted of 5 ships, 3 human vessels, 1 council observer ship, and 1 medical vessel equipped to help any Nightfangs they found who had been traumatized or injured. As they approached the planet, sensors showed it was indeed a death world. Extreme weather, dangerous flora and fauna, conditions that would be lethal to most galactic species. But it was also beautiful, with vast forests and deep oceans and mountains that touched the sky. No wonder they're so tough, Hana murmured, looking at the scans. Growing up here would make anyone strong. They detected life signs concentrated in several areas. As they got closer, they realized these weren't random clusters. They were settlements hidden underground to avoid detection. The Nightfangs had built cities complete with infrastructure and organization. The landing was tense. They chose a clearing near one of the larger settlements and sat down carefully. Taeyang, Shadow, Striker, and Echo were the first to exit the ship, with Hana and her security team following at a distance. The forest around them was dark and dense. Strange sounds echoed through the trees. And then, emerging from the shadows came Nightfangs. Dozens of them, then hundreds. They moved silently, surrounding the landing party, their patterns flashing in colors that ranged from curious amber to cautious red. Shadow stepped forward and made a complex vocalization. Striker and Echo joined her, their voices harmonizing in a song that carried through the forest. They were explaining, Taeyang realized, telling their people what had happened, where they had been, who these strange aliens were. An older Nightfang, larger than any they had seen, emerged from the pack. Her patterns were deep gold and silver, colors that seemed to indicate age and wisdom. She approached Shadow and the two touched foreheads, a gesture that was clearly significant. Then the elder turned to Taeyang. She studied him with intelligent eyes, and her pattern shifted through several colors. Finally, she made a sound, and Taeyang's translator device tried to interpret it. You brought them home. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, and behind it was a weight of emotion that the translator could only hint at. Gratitude. Sorrow for what had been lost. Hope for what might come next. Yes, Taeyang said simply, and I hope to learn from your people. The galaxy has been wrong about you for too long. Over the following days, first contact proceeded carefully. The Nightfang elders met with the human delegation and the council observers. Through translators and patient communication, they shared their history. How the Velrathi had come a generation ago, taking their strongest members as slaves. How they had been forced to hide underground, their civilization stunted by fear and loss. The elders were cautious but not hostile. They understood that not all aliens were like the Velrathi, and they recognized something in humans that other species lacked. On the 5th day, the elders called a gathering. The entire expedition was invited to a ceremony in the largest underground city. Thousands of Nightfangs gathered in a vast cavern lit by bioluminescent fungus and carefully tended fires. The ceremony was beautiful and complex, full of meaning that Taeyang only partially understood. But the core message was clear. The Nightfangs were accepting the hand of friendship that humanity offered. More than that, they were offering their own friendship in return. The elder who had first greeted them approached Taeyang. Through the translator, she spoke words that would echo across the galaxy. In our culture, the strongest leaders are those who guide without forcing, who earn trust rather than demand obedience. We see this strength in you and your people. From this day forward, let it be known that humans and Nightfangs are packmates. Then she did something that made everyone in the cavern go silent. She pressed her forehead to Taeyang's, her patterns glowing with every color she could produce. It was the highest honor in Nightfang culture, the gesture of choosing a bond sibling, a partnership that would last for life. Shadow approached and joined them, adding her own forehead to the connection. Then Striker, then Echo. One by one, other Nightfangs came forward, creating a circle of connection around Taeyang that represented not just personal bonds, but the link between two species. When the ceremony ended and the celebration began, Hana found Taeyang sitting quietly near one of the fires, surrounded by young Nightfangs who were curious about this strange alien who their elders trusted. How does it feel? Hana asked. To have changed everything? Taeyang watched Shadow playing with the young ones, her movements gentle and patient. She looked truly happy for the first time since he'd known her.